Winding your way down on Baker Street, lighting your head and dead on your feet. Well, another crazy day. You'll drink the night away and forget about it.
We have five of your esteemed colleagues that are sitting here on the stage with us, and we're going to give you an opportunity to hear from your colleagues. We'd like you to, as they respond, and of course introduce themselves, share information, respond to the questions that we've shared with them to prepare with. We ask that you be very mindful of some of the terms that you heard even Mr. Wilbanks say. Coherence. What were some of the consistent things that were being done on those campuses as they made the improvements that they made? And as they're going forward, what are some of the things that they'll continue to do? So we'd like to start. We'll start with Terry on the end. Terry,
Hello.
if you would introduce yourself, tell us what school and your improvements that you made from last year to this year, and then we'll let the others do the same.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Terry Brown, principal at Pleasantdale School, and we made a lot of great improvements, a lot of great hard work. We have a great team at Pleasantdale. Some of the things we were the most excited about was our movement from level 2 to level 3. We had many double-digit increases. We went up about 10% in math with our level 3 status, and we caught the state in many areas. We had double-digit increases in our social studies and our science. We spent a lot of time on that, and we're in the 90s with reading ELA, and that's really exciting.
Thank you, Terry. Excellent, excellent. Brent?
My name is Brent McBride. I am the principal at Kingsley Charter School. This is my first year at Kingsley. Some of the gains that we made were not necessarily the gains in student achievement, but they were in the implementation of some of the practices, best practices that we used with our staff. Student progress monitoring, using the STAR data on a more regular basis rather than just the 3 administrations that the county required, and really just having our staff set high expectations for our students and to hold them accountable to those expectations, and creating a plan for the next 2 to 3 years so that we will begin to see the gains that you saw at your school.
Lisa?
Good morning. My name is Lisa McGee. I'm principal of Lithonia Middle School. We saw some gains at Lithonia Middle School. We saw a 3% increase in writing. 93% of our students who took the end of the course test in coordinate algebra passed, so we were very pleased about that. We also saw gains in reading, and we stayed the same in ELA, and we talked about that as a leadership team about how can we move forward as far as looking at making gains in all areas. We saw a very slight gain in social studies, but we still have many, many Goliaths to take down.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Alexander, principal at Cedar Grove Middle School, under the 5-star leadership of Regional Superintendent Rachel Ziegler. Our increases at Cedar Grove Middle School include a 15% increase in writing, 1% increase in reading, 3% increase in ELA, and 4% increase in social studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace. Mr. Jones?
Good morning. My name is Michael Jones, principal of Stevenson High School. And we experienced, it would be great to say we experienced increase in all of our intercourse tests, but we did in most. We had a 5-point increase in 9th grade lit, 7-point increase in biology, and both of those are 9th grade courses, so the focus has been there. We had a 9-point increase in physical science and a 16-point increase in U.S. history. Even though we didn't have the increase in economics, what is so beneficial about the GAM process is that now we're able to pinpoint not only the decrease, but the teacher where the decrease occurs, so to give that person support. So we really believe that this is a process that we're going to continue and is going to cause us great gains.
Okay. So I guess I would ask a question to anyone on the panel. Mr. Jones, you responded. What about the GAM process, that model, did your faculty find the most interesting or the most important component? Terry, feel free.
Well, one of the most important things we've done in developing our teachers and our capacity is lots of conversations. And I've learned a lot of that with the National SAM Innovation Project about how important it is as a building leader to ask the right questions and to spend the time in conversations. And that's what we've been doing a lot with GAM, is we've been not just filling out forms, turning in reports or all of that. We've been really having great conversations, and I've been learning how to ask the right question. And so are our teacher leaders and our teachers. We're asking the right questions. But the most important thing in our thinking that's starting to shift is looking at those data and the assessment without being defensive, looking at it as feedback about what our impact is, that it's not about the validity of a question or it's not about where the question came from. It's about us considering what the data is telling us and how that question or that result informs our decision making and what we're doing in terms of our thinking and delivering instruction to move kids. So having a lot of conversations about that and having the teachers do the heavy lifting with us by asking them the questions that are really tough and introspective to focus on what the students are learning and the results.
And if I can just add a little to that, I think what Terry said is having conversation. I think a lot of times when we talk about initiatives, they're top down. You give them directions, you tell them what to do, and you expect that to happen. But I think the important piece is to get into the conversation, because when you have a conversation with someone and you think that you're speaking with a rational person, typically at the end of the conversation, you come out with the same conclusion, that the only way to move students forward is to examine the data. And not just the data, to understand that the data is connected to a person. So what does that person need in order to move forward? So I like that we began with conversations, and the conversations ended, you know, and as Terry said, you ask the right questions. You pretty much know where the conversation needs to go in the first place, but you begin those conversations with them.
Now, Mr. Jones and Terry, both of you mentioned data, conversations about data. So I would like some of the other principals to weigh in. What type of conversations did you have, or what type of data were you using to have those conversations? Candace and Brent, you have the mic. Go ahead and answer.
Well, when we started looking at our data, we had to kind of go all the way back to when you were looking at the 6-step data protocol, where we were, what we were already doing, where we were in that cycle, and where we needed to go. What we found out was that a lot of our teachers were collecting data, but there wasn't that alignment in how to use the data. So we had to have, our first real conversation that we had was, what data are we collecting, and how are we using that data to move our students forward? And what we found, one of the aha moments for my teachers, was that our achievement was decent. We have pretty good achievement. It was the growth that we were having. Our students may meet standards, but how are we moving them into that level 3, or how are we, interacting with their cohort. We looked a lot at our CCRPI data, where it let us know if we were making low or high growth, or there's different growth levels. And we were finding that our students were meeting standards, but they weren't keeping up with that cohort that they had. So in using the STAR data as well as other types of assessment, our common formative assessments, we did a lot of work around common formative assessments. And just formative assessments in general, breaking that barrier of everything doesn't have to be for a grade. Some of it just be for feedback to the students or to for the teachers. We really used a book called DataWise this year, which really DataWise, it talked about the instructional cycle, it talked about the cycle of using data, and it really aligned, didn't use the same vernacular, but it aligned with the 6-step data protocol, really. And it goes back to the same thing that Terry said earlier. It comes down to that conversation with teachers, breaking down that defensive barrier of, it's not that you're not doing a good job, but let's look at what your peers are doing. If you're struggling in this area, can you learn from others? A lot of vertical teaming also, when students were going from 2nd to 3rd grade, those teachers having a conversation together, what do they need to have to be prepared, and how can we move them forward? But one of the key things we did was aligned all of the data we had to a specific student. We talked about just because a student is in the Discovery program and just because they're making high grades doesn't mean that we don't need to still monitor those students. Maybe on a different level, we don't need to continually progress monitor them to make sure that they're going to be successful. But in order to the growth portion, we still need to monitor those students. Every student needs to be monitored, and some of them aren't just okay. They all need that.
Very good. Lisa and Candace, so how did you all approach growth, the conversation about growth on your campus?
My conversation was a little bit more personal with the teachers. I brought the teachers in, and we looked at the student growth model, and we talked about being in that upper right quadrant, and that's where we want to see growth. To the point where my teachers' achievement, I do have an issue with a concern with achievement in my building. So we actually looked at growth. Teachers would say, well, they came to me at a 760. Even though they may have made a 780, we still had some growth, but they may not have made the mark for the achievement. And so that's what we looked at. We had to have those conversations. We had to look at the STAR reading, the STAR math it generated an instructional plan. So we tried to use that instructional plan in order to guide our instruction with the students. What is it that we need? One of the biggest growth I think that we had was with special ed reading. And we did use some different strategies this past year. If you look at where I started with special ed reading in 2010, 2011, we've made like a 20-point gain. Our special ed students are at 81% meeting and exceeding expectations. So we looked at reading. We used all of the things that were available to us. We used a program called Oraton Willingham this past year and had our teacher work in small groups with those students. Because we do have some non-readers in the building. We do have some students who are reading on first grade level. We do have some students who just are not able to comprehend. So we tried to do some other things. And so we really, again, tried to put a name with the data and not just look at, our bottom line, the achievement, but just look at the growth. And so all the teachers, they had an understanding that they wanted to be in that upper right-hand quadrant when we looked at the student growth model.
Okay, Candace?
Yes, at Cedar Grove Middle School, this is my second year as principal at Cedar Grove Middle School. So coming in, we had to make sure, first it started with our administrative team, because we need to make sure that as a team, we had an approach that was one in which we could communicate well to teachers. So before we look at teachers, we had to look within. So we looked at the data. We looked at teachers with the highest level of failure rates. We looked at students in those classes who were fifth graders that were retained in grade 3, or students who were placed in sixth grade classes. So because that's some of the data that we already had, we had placed those students. So what are we going to do with them? They're here now. We're going to place them in ELT classes. We made sure that they were in Math 2's classes as well to provide support. We also, when the year started, there were students around the 9-week mark who were failing classes. They had already failed the first STAR assessment, and we're moving into the benchmark. So we had to meet with our teachers. So when everyone on the committee talks about conversations, we did so as well. So basically, we identified the weakest areas, the teachers, not just them, but what are our weaknesses as an administrative team? What do we need to do to put a process in place? So as a first-year principal at Cedar Grove, we used the PL opportunity to set up data notebooks. We took that data notebook, and what we all were familiar with was teacher keys, and we blended teacher keys and GAM. So in that process, for our teachers, we used the professional learning. We met with the A-team after meeting with Dr. Beasley. We met with the administrative team first, then we met with the leadership team. Then we branched out to the teachers in grade level meetings, and we talked about TEKS. We talked about GAM. We set a goal of where's your 70%. So teachers, students, everyone in the building, we had one system. Here is our notebook. We have 10 standards. We have TEKS. We have GAM. It's a process. We're going to work the process. So that's what we did at Cedar Grove Middle School.
Now, I would like all of you to respond to, there are two main components of GAM. Instruction has to occur, and you've got to provide those students using your data the additional support. In particular, how did your additional support look? How did you structure that so that you didn't compromise what happened during the instructional time? You have to teach the grade level content, but you at the same time have to shore those kids up, make sure that they get the additional support. So please, someone, Mr. Jones.
One of the focuses we made a concerted effort to talk about what could happen within the classroom, because that is, at high school, and high school principals understand, once the bell rings, trying to get them to do something extra is really difficult. So it's just common sense. If all of the students in your classes are at different levels, when you create a lesson, why create one lesson? You have to know how to differentiate within the classroom. So a lot of our emphasis were placed on what will we do in the classroom. If we only prepared a lesson for 2 levels, that's better than the lesson that we prepared for 1 level the entire year. So what we did is looking at the data and taking out some big pieces, and looking at STAR data, or we're looking at common assessment data, what type of differentiated activity I can do within the classroom that could assist the kids, because the targeted tutorial was great, all those things were great, but we knew we would get the bang for our buck on what we would do within the classroom.
Okay. Someone else?
And then in addition to that, some of our, for instance, our coordinated algebra classes in our 9th grade academy, they all teach the coordinated algebra at the same block. What they did within the block is they did some swapping as it relates to kids in some of their deficit areas. So those type of things we try to do during the school day, because understanding that, the target tutorial, all that is great, we wanted to do what we needed to do during the school day.
So you had a focus of providing that additional support in the classroom while you also taught the grade level content, but they had to use differentiation because the students are at various levels.
Yes.
Candace, you say?
Yes. At Cedar Grove Middle School, we're on a block schedule, so we have to capitalize off of the ELT time. So we had to make sure we were on a 9-week rotation for first period. So they're in there about 90 minutes, and they were rotating out of that class. So we had to make sure that the students who were identified as needing the assistance, that they were go back to that same class. So if I still needed math, then I would go back to an ELT math class. And also with the connections classes, we have math twos at Cedar Grove Middle School. Our math twos person was very good with data, and we would go in and she would run reports with STAR as well and work with the content teachers to identify who needs to remain in her math twos class. So for the extended time for our students, that was 2nd semester with the tutorial, but we had teachers after school 1st semester working diligently to help those students. So during the actual school day, we had the remediation in the math tools classes during connections, and during the ELT time, we placed those children inside of the classes in which they needed the most support.
Okay. Brent?
Some of the things that we did was whenever we were looking at our students, small group instruction was always very important in our classroom, just in our daily instruction. We revamped our lesson plans to make sure that our differentiation was planned for. Differentiation doesn't happen on accident. So we made sure that, the 3 main groups were covered, the high students, the students that were pretty much on level, and then the students who needed some remediation. And then the teachers would still differentiate based on the students' individual needs. We also worked in a remediation block into our schedule, to where when teachers would meet on Tuesdays during their data team meetings, if they did an item analysis on their common formative assessments and they found that there was a skill that across the board needed to be reached, or if there were certain group, teachers would take ownership of that skill, and then they would begin to remediate that skill with the students. But differentiation was really the key, and I think it seems to be a common thread with all of us. Differentiation is the key to monitoring those students.
Okay.
Just wanted to add, we also did in-house strategies where we have math tools in place. We had 2 math tool classes. We also did our general before and after school tutorial as well as Saturday school. And since I am a focus school, then we also focused on math using the software Alex in the after school program as well as Saturday school. And we've also had it during the summer.
Very good. Terry?
A lot of our common assessments, we did bi-weekly common assessments, helped keep our groups dynamic. And when the teachers did the common assessments, they assessed the kids in real time. So they took notes, they assessed it, and the kids were given feedback immediately within the class to revise. So the whole idea of teachers welcoming errors, because that gives us insight in how we need to teach differently, was a mind shift for our teachers. Instead of collecting papers, you're assessing how the kids are doing while they're taking the common assessments. And our coaches set those up, Monique Fields and Connie Johns, and had conversations with the teachers after the common assessments happened, because we're a total co-teaching school. We have ELL, we have students with disability, our Title I support. We made the commitment that there's only going to be station teaching or parallel teaching, so that kids are getting feedback consistently and direct instruction within the class. Our student success tutors helped us too, because those common assessments were able to help make it very strategic in how we use them to clear up any misconceptions. And one of the most powerful things we did in terms of math that our instructional coach, Ms. Fields, did was providing the teachers with worked examples of problem solving, because often we say, go teach problem solving. And a lot of our teachers were trying to think, well, what does that look like? But we learned from Vanderwall and Riccomini that if you give kids the worked problem, thinking of that end in mind, and let them see the different approaches of what a good thinker does as a mathematician, they're able to see where they're needing to go, because they just don't have the background to do it without some kind of anchor. So that was a big push in terms of math, and we saw a lot of great results, especially with our level 3 results, in thinking that way about our instruction.
Well, a few more questions. Terry, you mentioned your challenge in math. I'd like the rest of you to share, what was your main challenge as you began to have conversations with your teachers and you began to really try to work on the differentiation? What was the main challenge, if you could identify one main challenge?
I know mathematics was the main challenge for us, and I do want to say that, never have I worked with a group of professionals as my math department. Once you look at data, then you need to become reflective, and they were really reflective on their teaching processes and what they did. And one thing that was discussed here was a problem-solving framework. And that's something that needs to happen on a daily basis, and that they have agreed to do. And in addition to that is the depth of knowledge as it relates to questioning. Once we start analyzing assessments that we were using prior to GAM, we realized that all of the questioning was level 1, level 2. None of the questioning was equivalent to what they were taking on the assessments. So again, making that shift in mathematics was our #1 challenge, and like I said, that the group of math teachers that we had were extremely reflective in their practices, and that's something that we're going to do next year, well this year, is have a standardized way of solving problems.
Very good. Okay, Brent?
Math was also our area of challenge. Some of the things we looked at were, specifically with the growth, was the level of rigor that we were presenting our students with. Very similar to what he was talking about. A lot of our questions were just computation solving the problems, and there was no working it out in models, explaining, justifying, describing, the reason that you did things. One of the things we did was try to add that rigor by implementing exemplars in our classrooms, to where students had high order thinking questions that were presented to them, and they actually had to think it out. And these were questions that would take them a period of time. Time is one of the things that every teacher will tell you is a challenge in their classroom. So it was working out the mechanics of how am I going to fit all of this into my day? How am I going to have the students rotate to me? So there was a lot of best practices that we had to work out as a staff. But with the students, it was how are we going to present them with rigorous curriculum and rigorous examples of work so that they are going to be prepared. And now, of course, that we're coming with the milestones, that's going to be a whole other level of rigor that we're going to have to increase. But we've all seemed to be on that track.
Okay. Others?
Math is also my challenge, along with a couple others, but and so with math, what we're doing this upcoming year, we're going to go back to double dosing. I am a focus school, so we're trying to catch those students during the school year. So I've submitted a proposal for 2 additional teachers for the FLP program to teach it within the school day. And just so that we can have those small groups and catch those, fill in those gaps of those skills that the students are missing. I think someone said yesterday in the meeting about the students not having those basic skills, and that is so true. And sometimes you're trying to teach them how to problem solve, but they're still not knowing the basic facts. And so that's what our FLP program is going to do for us within the school day, is that we're going to create those 2 classes, make sure the students have the basic work, they'll work on Alex during the school day and fill in those gaps so that we can bring up our growth and achievement.
Some of the challenges during GAM implementation at Cedar Grove were when we looked at the monitoring of the academic boosters toward the second semester. We had already had the students identified for tutorial classes, and when we analyzed and compared the academic boosters to who was actually sitting in those classes, we recognized that we needed to have more academic boosters who were identified per the data in the tutorial classes receiving support. Although our goal is to make sure that we add value with all students. That was a challenge. Mathematics, we dropped by 3 percentage points. Now, writing improved 15 percentage points. So our students can write a 5-paragraph essay about why they don't know their integer rules. But we need them to make sure that they understand what is the process for math and the problem-solving piece that's sometimes missing. One last challenge that we had at Cedar Grove was use of some resources that were already in place, like IDMS. The teachers were not creating common assessments or tests in the IDMS database, so I taught the class in how you create a teacher-created test in IDMS. We do not have an academic data coach. We will this year, but to go in and to have those conversations, teach the class, make sure that teachers understood that this is a process that will help the students improve overall. And so that piece, not knowing and then providing the lessons, the support, so that the teachers can use the resources that DeKalb offers.
Very good. Terry?
One of our biggest challenges at Pleasantdale is you can't leave any stone unturned because everything is vital. If we focus on one area, we will crash and burn in something else because everything has to be considered. And my assistant principal at the time, Dolores Pichelle, and I sat down this last summer and we talked about unit planning and integrating the subjects as a way of getting that going. And that's a big challenge for us because sometimes our thinking is so linear. How can we integrate our reading with science and social studies so you're still teaching kids those reading skills, but you're addressing the content? And how are we integrating math and making it relevant with science and social studies, because that happens then. So Dr. Pichelle worked with us on getting our master schedule set up, so we're integrating those subjects, and now we're still working with the teachers on how to make our lessons and our units more integrated.
Very good. My last question to the panel is, as a leader, as we prepare for the new year, what would you identify as a strategic action on your part as a leader that will be foundational to the success your school will experience in the new year?
One of the strategic things we're doing is currently I have teachers right now working at my school to rewrite some of the assessments that we're using to align with the standards. We're looking at the DOK levels and standards, But what we're doing is having them write their end-of-unit assessments based on the standards, so then we can go back and use our backwards design model to create the formative assessments and then plan our lessons. Because one of the things that I noticed this year that was happening was that we were doing lesson plans, teaching, and then creating our assessments. And what was happening was if the students were doing well on something, there seemed to be a lot of those questions on the test. And if they weren't doing well on it, there may be one or two. And we were finding that some of our achievement was inflated. So that was one of the things that we had to address. I guess that would go back to a conversation we had, is that we need to make sure that we're not inflating our students' achievement. But by going ahead and writing those assessments and being strategic on how we set them up, using best practices to write the assessments, have them vetted through the Region 1 TL department, pulling in those resources so that we know we actually have good assessments, that will help us plan for good instruction, which will increase our rigor and help our growth and achievement.
Very good. Anyone want to add to that?
Collaboration.
Okay. You want to expound, Lisa?
I think it's so important for teachers to collaborate together to not just whether you're designing assessments or you're planning a lesson, but they also just need to talk about and say, what is it that I can do in order to make this particular concept more engaging? How can I make this concept more relevant to their real life? How can I make it applicable to everything that they're doing? And so I think once they start collaborating, once they start bouncing ideas off each other, and once, and someone said earlier, we're not working individually. We're working as a team. So even as, when I talk to my colleagues, I'm like, what are you doing? How can I do that? Let me see, how can I make that work at Lithonia Middle School? So collaboration is key in order to make us grow.
All right, now.
Can I add something real quick on that? Because I'll get in trouble if I don't. The principals at Austin Elementary, Dunwoody Elementary, and Woodward Elementary, they are also part of this. I don't want to take credit for all that. Part of this assessment writing, that collaboration piece that she just talked about is so key because they all have strengths at their school that I don't have. Okay. And so all of our teachers are working together, and that is a huge key. Watching them yesterday work together, I had aha moments in that collaboration piece. So very, very key.
All right, team. Now, you all separate. Your lunches are on the other side. These people are hungry. But do you have any burning, last-minute comments, very pithy ones, that you would like to share with your colleagues?
One of the things, and our theme this year is Jaguars, all in, G to G, geared to greatness. And when I say all in, we talk about teachers being in, but this year we're going to pull our students in because we look at this data and it seems like they don't have a clue. We're doing all these things to them, but they aren't involved in the data. What does the data mean to them? So this year we're going to put a lot of emphasis on pulling them into this process.
Okay, thank you.
And finally, Dr. Beasley, you talked about instruction, so we need to finish hiring quality staff. Monitoring the STAR assessment that we have. You can use our Title I funds as we move forward to start our tutorial sessions after school, extend the school day. Monitor the professional learning that we have. We can have all the professional learning in the world, but we need to monitor it and build capacity. So I'm taking the IMAC approach, IMAC, identify, monitor, adjust, and communicate. Thank you.
All right. All right, Terry.
And I'll be really fast because I'm hungry too. Visible learning, we're looking at a lot of the mindsets of John Hattie's stuff on visible learning and what that means. Interactive notebooks, so we can get kids to loop back throughout the year to content. And that's something concrete that we're really building as a school-wide. And we're taking a look at some innovation with the maker movement. Invent to learn, and every kid's a maker.
Very good, very good. Well, let's give them a hand, you all. Thank you.